3,000 years ago, on a hill in Jerusalem, King Solomon is said to have built the most extraordinary building in the ancient world, a house for God, covered floor to ceiling in gold, guarded by 20-foot statues of winged cherubim, and home to the most sacred object in the ancient Near East, the Ark of the Covenant. Today, that hill is one of the most fought-over pieces of land on Earth. And yet, remarkably, archaeologists have never been allowed to dig there. So what do we actually know about Solomon's temple, and what is legend? This is the true story, as best as the evidence can tell it. According to the Hebrew Bible, Solomon was the son of King David and Bathsheba, and he ruled a unified kingdom of Israel and Judah, what's often called the United Monarchy, for 40 years, beginning around 970 BCE. But here's the first thing a rigorous historian has to say. No inscription, no Egyptian record, no Mesopotamian tablet from Solomon's own lifetime mentions him by name. As historian Amelie Kurt has put it, there is not a single contemporary reference to either David or Solomon. David fares slightly better. The 9th century BCE Tel Dan stele references the House of David, which most scholars accept as real evidence of a Davidic dynasty. But that stele says nothing about Solomon and nothing about a temple. So everything we're about to describe comes primarily from one source, the biblical text, chiefly the books of Kings and Chronicles, supplemented centuries later by the Jewish historian Josephus. We'll flag clearly throughout where the archaeology agrees with that text and where it simply can't confirm it one way or the other. The Bible says Solomon didn't build alone. He struck a deal with Hiram, king of Tyre, a maritime trading power famous for skilled craftsmen and access to the cedar forests of Lebanon. In exchange for enormous shipments of wheat and olive oil, Hiram supplied cedar and cypress timber, cut and floated down the coast by Sidonian workers. Is this plausible? Almost certainly yes. Phoenician timber trade and craftsmanship dominance in this era is well established independently. But is it independently documented? A Tyrian record naming Solomon? No. This detail comes to us only through the biblical text and later through Josephus, who says he cross-checked it against now-lost Tyrian court annals. Plausible history, but not proven history.
Construction, the text says, required a massive workforce. 30,000 Israelite laborers conscripted in rotating monthly shifts, plus 70,000 additional laborers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hill country, all managed by 3,300 foremen. Whether this was closer to a rotating public works tax or something closer to forced servitude is still debated by biblical scholars. The text itself is ambiguous, and archaeology can't settle it either way. The building itself followed what scholars call a long room plan, split into 3 parts: an entrance porch, a main hall, and, at the very back, a perfect cube-shaped inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, where the Ark would rest. The Bible gives its dimensions in cubits, 60 long, 20 wide, 30 high. Here's where we need to slow down. A cubit wasn't one fixed measurement in the ancient world. Using the shorter, more common cubit, about 45 centimeters, the temple proper comes out to roughly 27 meters long, 9 meters wide, and 13 to 15 meters high, about the footprint of a large modern house, not a colossal monument. Using a longer royal cubit, add another 15 to 17%. Either way, impressive for its time and place, but not the gargantuan structure some popular accounts imagine. Construction took 7 years, beginning in Solomon's 4th year on the throne. Depending on which ancient chronology you follow, that's commonly placed around 966 to 957 BCE, though we should be honest that this is a backward calculated estimate, not a date fixed by any surviving inscription. Inside, the text describes a building unlike anything else attested in the region. Cedar-paneled walls, cypress floors, and interior surfaces, the altar, the doors, even the door sockets, overlaid in gold. In the Holy of Holies stood 2 olive wood cherubim, each 15 feet tall, their wings stretching wall to wall. At the entrance stood 2 freestanding bronze pillars, 18 cubits high, with elaborate capitals decorated in latticework and 400 bronze pomegranates. They had names, Jachin on the south and Boaz on the north. And in the courtyard sat the molten sea, a massive bronze basin resting on 12 bronze oxen, used for priestly washing. Interestingly, the Bible and Josephus don't even agree on its exact capacity, a small but telling reminder that ancient sources, even closely related ones, transmit numbers imperfectly. At the center of it all, hidden from view behind the cherubim, sat the Ark of the Covenant, the wooden, gold-covered chest said to house the tablets of the 10 Commandments. No archaeological trace of the Ark or anything resembling it has ever been found. We'll come back to its fate later, because it disappears from the historical record entirely. One more honesty check. Josephus later claims the temple held tens of thousands of golden vials, silver vials, and trumpets, numbers that vastly exceed the biblical account and that most historians treat as rhetorical exaggeration, typical of ancient historical writing, not a literal inventory. Here's the single most important fact in this entire story. No archaeological excavation has ever taken place on the Temple Mount itself. The site, sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and today the location of the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, is administered by the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf, and digging there is politically and religiously off-limits. On top of that, when Herod the Great massively expanded the platform for the Second Temple centuries later, he buried whatever earlier remains existed. So there is no excavated proof of the temple's existence, size, or appearance. Full stop. Everything archaeologists can offer is indirect. The most useful comparison comes from Ain Dara, a temple in northern Syria in continuous use from roughly 1300 to 740 BCE. Scholars have identified over 30 shared architectural features with the biblical description. The same 3-part plan, twin entrance columns, even a large stone basin comparable to the molten sea. It doesn't prove Solomon's temple existed. It proves this type of temple was real and common across the region at the right time. Closer to home, in 2012, archaeologists found an actual First Temple period sanctuary at Tel Motza, just a few miles from Jerusalem. Proof that formal Israelite temples were being built in this exact period, even if this specific one isn't Solomon's. And at Arad in the Negev desert sits the only fully excavated ancient Israelite sanctuary ever found. Smaller, differently shaped, but a real physical Iron Age Israelite holy place you can visit today. Because the Temple Mount can't be touched directly, researchers have turned to something unusual, sifting through soil. When Islamic authorities illegally removed thousands of tons of dirt from the Temple Mount in the late 1990s without any excavation record, dumping it in a nearby valley, archaeologists Gabriel Barkay and Zakid Vira founded the Temple Mount Sifting Project to wet sift through it by hand. They've recovered genuine First Temple period seals, arrowheads, and pottery, evidence that something significant was happening on that hill nearly 3,000 years ago. But none of it was found in its original position. It tells us the mount was in active religious and administrative use. It does not confirm the grandeur of the temple as described in Scripture. In the late 1980s, the Israel Museum acquired a thumb-sized ornament carved from hippopotamus bone, bearing an inscription reading roughly, "Belonging to the temple of Yahweh, holy to the priests." For years, it was celebrated as possibly the only physical artifact ever connected to Solomon's temple.
The corrosion layer seen
Then,
here is
in
mostly
2004 and 2005,
tiny
an Israeli
details
police
lines become
investigation
visible as the
into
artifact is
antiquities
rotated.
fraud
Each
examined
shift
it
of the tweezers
forensically.
reveals new characters
Their
that haven't
conclusion?
seen light for
The
centuries.
object
The goal
itself is genuinely ancient, but centuries older than Solomon, and its inscription is a modern forgery. To be fair,
A minority of researchers have since pushed back, arguing the inscription crosses an ancient crack in a way that would be nearly impossible to fake. But the museum's official position and the mainstream scholarly one still stand. Forgery. It's a useful reminder that even museums get fooled, and that extraordinary claims about the temple deserve extraordinary scrutiny.
So, where do historians actually land? It's not a simple yes or no. Archaeologist Israel Finkelstein argues that much of the monumental building evidence traditionally credited to Solomon's era actually belongs a century later, meaning 10th century Jerusalem was likely a small, modest highland town, not the capital of a glittering empire. Amihai Mazar has pushed back, defending a chronology that keeps more 10th century evidence tied to Solomon's reign. William Dever has argued the temple's described layout is consistent with genuine Iron Age architecture and shouldn't be dismissed. Others, like Oded Lipschitz, have suggested we abandon the whole united monarchy framing altogether. The most honest summary: most scholars today accept that a historical Solomon likely existed and that Jerusalem had real political organization in this era. What remains genuinely disputed is the scale, how big his kingdom was, how grand his building projects really were, and how much of the biblical description reflects historical memory versus later idealization. The temple stood for roughly 4 centuries. It ended in fire. After Judah rebelled against Babylonian rule under King Zedekiah, the Neo-Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II laid siege to Jerusalem. When the city fell, his commander, Nebuzaradan, burned the temple, tore down the city walls, and carried its gold, silver, and bronze back to Babylon. Zedekiah was captured and blinded. This is where the story gets its strongest outside confirmation in the entire briefing. The Babylonian chronicles, cuneiform tablets translated in 1956, independently verify Nebuchadnezzar's campaigns against Jerusalem down to specific dates. The general destruction, commonly dated to 586 BCE, is accepted across the entire scholarly spectrum. And the Ark of the Covenant? The biblical text describes soldiers hauling off nearly everything else, but it never says what happened to the Ark itself. It simply vanishes from history. Jewish tradition says it was hidden beneath the Temple Mount. Ethiopian Orthodox tradition claims Solomon's son by the Queen of Sheba carried it to Aksum, where it supposedly remains today. Neither claim has any archaeological support. The truth is simpler and more unsettling. Nobody knows.
Exiled Judites eventually returned and rebuilt on the same site around 516 BCE. A smaller second temple, later transformed by Herod the Great into the massive complex whose retaining walls, including the Western Wall, still stand in Jerusalem today. That structure was destroyed by Rome in 70 CE. The Temple Mount remained sacred to 3 faiths: Judaism's holiest site, revered in Christian traditions through the New Testament and later the Knights Templar, and venerated in Islam as Haram al-Sharif, home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. Before we go, let's clear up a few things you may have heard. No, there is no evidence of aliens or lost advanced technology. The text itself credits ordinary Iron Age labor and Phoenician craftsmanship. No, the temple wasn't some impossibly colossal structure. By the best cubit estimates, it was roughly the size of a large house. No, the Ark has not been definitively found anywhere. Every claim of that kind is tradition, not evidence. And no, archaeologists have not excavated the ruins of Solomon's temple because, as we said at the start, nobody has ever been allowed to dig there at all. Solomon's temple sits at a strange crossroads of history and faith, a building we can describe in extraordinary architectural detail from a text written by people who believed deeply in its importance, standing on a hill we're still not allowed to fully examine. Maybe that's fitting. Some of history's biggest questions are the ones we can describe precisely and still can't prove.